Hi, this is Tom, and this is the Gospel according to St. Mark. Jesus was a great teacher, and one of his favorite ways of teaching was to tell a kind of story known as a parable. Parables were stories that were drawn from everyday life, so they could be taken from agriculture or from society, or just the things that you see every day, and Jesus would find a way to communicate an eternal truth with those stories. Sometimes the stories would seem like puzzles that the listener would try to solve and find the meaning. One of the parables that Jesus said was one of his most important was the parable of the sower. He tells a story about seed being sown on a path by a sower. Some of it falls onto a path and the birds ate it up. Some fell onto rocky ground and it sprouted up quickly and it had no root. Some fell into thorns, it got choked up, and others went onto good soil and it yielded 30, 60, and 100-fold. Now Jesus explains the parable in this way to his followers. He says, the sower sows the word. These are the ones on the path where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan immediately comes and takes away the word that is sown in them. And it's his way of saying that when the gospel is received by people, sometimes it never makes it to its destination. It's just it's thrown and it's picked up as quickly as it's laid down. And these are the ones on rocky ground, the seed sown on rocky ground. And when they hear the word, they immediately receive it with joy, but they have no root and endure only for a while. Then when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately they fall away. And trouble and persecution were things that the early Christians dealt with on a regular basis. They knew that some people would hear the word and they would be excited about it at first, but when they saw that it required some commitment, they found themselves going in a different direction. And others are those sown among the thorns, and they're the ones who hear the word, but the cares of the world, the lure of wealth, and the desire for other things come in and choke the word, and it yields nothing. And this speaks to people who they make a commitment to God, and they take it seriously, but as soon as it starts to grow, the gospel starts to grow in them, it starts to kind of get choked up, and it starts to get ruined, because the worries of the world get in the way. And the last one is the one sown on good soil, and they hear the word and accept it and bear fruit 30, 60, and 100-fold. And it says that from little tiny seeds, which are the seeds of faith, great things can happen if we are good soil, if we allow ourselves to be used in great ways. Jesus tells another parable about a seed, and it's a parable of the mustard seed. And he says this, what can we compare the kingdom of God, or what parable will we use for it? It's like a mustard seed, which when sown upon the ground is the smallest of all seeds on earth. Yet when it's sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs and puts forth large branches so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade. Now, this is a really cool image that Jesus uses. He uses the image of the tiniest of all seeds growing in the ground, and it seems to do nothing, but when it grows, it becomes one of the greatest of all shrubs. And it's the birds of the sky make their nest in the shrub. And Jesus says that our life of faith can be like that. It can be something that is almost small and imperceptible, but if we allow it to grow, if we allow it to do good things, it can change our lives. It can change the lives of the people around us. It might seem ordinary at first, but it becomes something extraordinary. This was something that the early Christian communities could readily identify with, because if you think about it, the first followers of Jesus were just a handful of people who kind of blended in the crowd, who seemed like they were just everyday people. And when they started to sow their seed into the culture, it started off as a small, tiny movement, but became this great movement of faith. Pope Benedict XVI used this image when he talked about any good, authentic movement in the church, and he said that any real, authentic movement in the church begins with the same principle as the mustard seed. Let's take, for example, the Franciscan order. St. Francis was a man who lived in his time, and he was just one person who just lived in his culture and tried to live the gospel out to the fullest of his capacity. But when he started to live this way, it became infectious, it took hold, it became part of the culture, and all of a sudden it grew into this great movement that became the Franciscan order. And it's in the same way, our lives in parishes can be the same way. We come here and we come to church every Sunday, and we hear the message of the word, and we take this message with us. It's like we're coming here to collect seed. And when we go back into our culture and we go back into the world, we are asked to sow seed into the culture, into our families, with our friends, into our workplaces. And we might not see the result of it right away. But Jesus says that if we take the principle of the mustard seed into mind, then we can transform our world, we can transform our culture, our communities, our families, our workplaces, just with the little bit of faith that we do have.